So cool. So Peter, you're going to get to know that Ned loves the outdoors. Martin loves the beach. He's always in the car overlooking the ocean.
Oh, tough life, Martin.
Hi, Peter. Hi, everybody.
I also love the fact that you have 4 double letters in your last name. That's pretty remarkable.
There's not many of us.
Heather, do you want to turn on your camera really quick? And let me just make sure that I'm not missing.
Hi, Heather.
Hello.
Heather, yeah, I guess everybody is on. The only person I don't see yet is Ben. Heather representing the women. So,
wait, I read. Nicole is missing.
Oh, Nicole. Okay, let me. Interesting. Okay, I'll see what she is. Well, Ben, I don't know if your camera is supposed to be facing the wicker baskets or if you have to turn it around, but we don't see you yet. And I'm going to put everybody on mute just for a moment. Hey, Ben?
Yeah, I'm just going to turn around.
Okay, cool. Let's wait for that. Well, actually, as Ben is doing that, so everybody, most of you, sorry, Ben? Here, I'm going to just put you on mute for a second while I give the rules of the group mentorship. Oh, there's Nicole right there. Cool. Hey, Nicole. Ah, what a great group this is. Oh my God, I love it. So most of you are familiar with Zoom, but for those who aren't, this is I'm just gonna give you some rules of conduct, even though I don't have to go into much detail because I know most of you. So the main thing is that when it's not your turn, keep your microphone off, keep yourself muted, just so there's no background noises. This is the one program where there's not going to be a moderator. So once I introduce Peter and kind of just see the first person going, I'm going to leave completely. So just keep aware that there's other people in the group. So when each person should get about 25 minutes or so of feedback per week. So around the 25-minute mark, don't start being like, I have a completely other script let's talk about. So make sure everybody gets the same amount of time. So around the 25-minute mark, just know that you should be wrapping up. If you have to move around or do anything crazy, when it's not your turn, make sure your camera is off so there's no distraction. And another thing, if you guys aren't familiar with Zoom, on the top right, there's a speaker view and a gallery view. So some of you, I like to do it in the gallery view where I can see everybody at once, just in case I have to kind of point somebody out. But if you like to just do it one-on-one, so you just see Peter's face when you guys are talking, you could do that as well. If you're not on the class email list and you want to be, let me know. I think most of you are. If you haven't emailed me to let me know, you should. It's always better to share your pages with each other, just so when Peter's giving feedback to your peers, you're not just sitting there being like, I have no idea what he's talking about. And that's kind of it. And that's, I think that's pretty much about it. If something crazy happens in the middle of it, like the internet falls or somebody explodes, just email me and I'll hop back in and just make sure everything is restored. And that's pretty much about it. Ben, the only thing is, I don't know if you're still trying to turn your camera around, but hopefully that would be fixed when it's your turn. Anybody have any questions?
They are very nice baskets.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What did you say, Martin?
Saying hi, Joe. It's good to see you. Thanks, man.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yes, those are really pretty wicker baskets as well. Okay, anybody have any last questions for me about this? Oh, sorry, Ned?
Yeah, I have 2 dogs. If I have to deal with them, how do you put that placard up? You know, it goes up black. It says either roadmap or whatever. Is there a way to do that on the meeting thing here? You know?
How do you what?
If I have to leave
on the bottom left. Oh, speaking of dogs, by the way, I want everybody should see Peter's new dog.
This is Red.
Oh, there you go. Hey.
Normally I'm a pretty high energy person, but Red has decided that 3 a.m. is a very good time to wake up and play, and doesn't really go back to bed much until about 6 a.m. So I'm very sleep deprived because we've had her for 2 weeks now.
It's beautiful.
She's the greatest, but see, now she's totally calm and sleepy.
I'm totally normal. I'm an angel.
Yeah, she sleeps all day, and then at 3 in the morning, she's totally crazy and full of beans. And so anyway, I'm a little tired, and I apologize for that. But I did want you all to meet Red because she's gorgeous.
Oh, she's so cute. Everybody get your dogs. Let's have a little dog date. Cool. Yeah. So Nat, on the bottom left, you see the stop video icon?
At bottom left, yeah.
Yeah. So you just press that, and that'll shut off your camera.
Okay, very good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is my Play-Doh here.
Oh, very cute.
And but he suffers from grand mal. But if anyone needs, found the perfect vet and medicine for grand mals for dogs. If anyone needs it, let me know. But this is my.
Oh, how cute! Oh my God, can we just do this for 2 hours? That would be the best group mentorship ever. I would love it. Okay, cool. So why don't we jump right in? Oh no, before we do this, one last thing. Hey Ben, how's everything going over there?
For some reason, this camera doesn't want to, but I can hear you guys fine. I'll sort it out. Carry on.
Okay, cool, awesome. That is so mysterious. I love it.
Yeah, it's really odd.
Okay, cool. So Peter, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump right in.
Okay, so I'm a longtime studio executive, worked at Universal Pictures, ran Propaganda's film division, ran John Hughes's company, worked for Spring Creek Pictures, had my own company for 10 years, produced 8 movies, then went into academia for 8 years, got back into producing and managing about 4 years ago. I currently have 3 writers staffed on shows, 2 young writers who have created a TV show that's starring Kirsten Dunst, 2 movies in pre-production, 1 at Amazon, 1 at Film Nation. So I'm very active again now as a manager and producer. My goal for these sessions, and means that you guys have to be prepared for things to be blunt and tough, is that you are top tier writers. You're not novices. You're not, like students who are, taking intro to screenwriting. So I'm going to treat all of you as if you were clients and beat you up the way I beat up my clients. And I hope you can handle it. The other thing is that I have a very specific methodology when I work with my clients or, with writers on a project. And so some of you will get a different kind of feedback than others, depending on both where I think your script is in terms of how much it approximates a professional level script that I would be ready to go to agents or studio executives or buyers with, and how much it isn't there yet. And then secondly, how much I feel, as with more of my producer hat on, that this is something that actually has a chance in the marketplace. So those are 2 different decision nodes, right? And 2 different ways of going forward with the mentorship. The other thing that I want to say is that the first time I read a script, I actually kind of try to turn off a lot of my analytical faculties and just read the script as if I am watching a TV show or watching a movie, because I feel like that is the most important thing. Screenwriting is the only art form where you really have to have the audience in mind. You can write a poem, you can write a book, you can write a play, you can choreograph a dance, you can paint a painting, and you don't really have to care whether or not there's an audience, because you can stage a play for free, you can self-publish a chapbook, you can do a little gallery show in your garage. The audience doesn't matter. You can always have people look at your work. This is the only business where if there's no audience, your work doesn't exist. Nobody wants to read your screenplay. Nobody, right? So the only way people read your screenplay is if it gets in the hands of managers and agents or producers who then turn it into a movie or a TV show, and then people watch the movie or TV show. So the first time I read a script, I try to just be an audience. And I just try to say, do I like this? Do I not like this? Am I interested? Am I bored? Where am I interested? Where am I bored? Why would I pay $17 at the ArcLight Theater to go see this thing? Or after a busy day at work, would I get a nice glass of red wine, turn on the tube and watch this, and that to me is much more important than my analytical faculties, which I then apply when I reread the script if it's a client or a project that I really want to work on, right? Because then I'm saying, yeah, I'd like to watch this, but it needs work. So now I'm going to like really look at where I was bored or where I got pushed out of the script or why I think something isn't working structurally or tonally or in terms of character. And then I'll start to tease those things out through a whole kind of analytical process internally and in dialogue with the client, right? So what you guys are getting now is my audience reaction to your script, right? Like just gut level response. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Totally, man.
Say again?
I really like that.
Okay, good. So I went in order of who submitted first. I just figured that was fair to start with whoever jumped in. To use a cliche, which you guys never should, the early bird gets the worm. So Nicole, we're going to start with you. And I made note of the time.
Cool. Well then, awesome. Ben, did you have a question?
Any questions?
Ben, I don't know if Ben has his finger up or he's just posing Madonna style, but maybe, Ben, can you hear us? Sorry, Ben?
Yeah,
Okay, you're good?
I can hear.
Yeah, Ben, you're, I think because you're so far away, you're frozen and your audio is really lagging.
Yeah. You might want to, Ben, for keep your camera off. Sometimes that helps the connection.
Yeah.
There's just less like, I don't know what the term is, but there's just less of whatever it needs to be. So for now, keep it on. When it's your turn, you might want to consider setting up your camera. Cool. So Nicole, you're up. Everybody else, I will leave. Ben, Peter, I'm going to make you the host right now.
Okie doke.
Power over everything. Have a great class, and we'll talk soon. Bye, guys.
Sorry.
All right. So Nicole, the immediate gut level reaction that I have to your script is that it is overly familiar. Now you may have begun this before some of these other works hit the marketplace, and that's always extremely, frustrating for a writer to sort of be eclipsed by things that get produced and then sort of take away your really good ideas. And also because you're dealing here with a lot of very ambitious themes and things that are probably very important to you, that makes it even harder because you're not, it's not like, oh, I had a cool sci-fi, concept or even to a better analogy, like, oh, I came up with a really good high concept comedy, a talking teddy bear, and then like Ted comes out, and you feel kind of screwed, right? Like this is different because you really want to deal with women's reproductive rights and misogyny and how society treats women and a whole series of really ambitious themes, right? Mm-hmm. But when I read it, I'm immediately like comparing it to Handmaid's Tale. And then just because I also think this is a very important subject, I mean, both of the films I have in pre-production are about women empowerment and women's reproductive rights and society's treatment of women, et cetera. So, I am predisposed to enjoy a script like this, but I've also seen Children of Men, and I've also seen Never Let Me Go. And to a certain extent, once you add up those three movies, it's very difficult to find something that is conceptually or in a character framework now different or special about your script.
Oh, I totally understand. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I also have an MBA, and in MBA school, you learn a very important business concept called opportunity cost, right? And opportunity cost is, financially, opportunity cost is you can always invest $1 and earn a nickel. But the opportunity cost of investing $1 and earning a nickel is maybe if you had done more research and done more work, you could invest that $1 and earn a quarter. And the opportunity cost is you've made the easy choice of earning a nickel when you could have earned a quarter. When you translate that to writing, the opportunity cost is you're going to spend anywhere from 3 months to 5 years of your life working on this project. And the opportunity cost is that you could have been writing something else. You could have been writing 2 other things. You could have been doing some gardening, but you've chosen to spend, 3 months to 5 years of your life on this, right? And so, like, as your mentor, I feel like this project should unfortunately go back in the drawer.
Okay.
The opportunity cost is just
Right.
so high right now to try to figure out a way to make this. I never use the word unique because Hollywood doesn't even want things that are unique. They want things that are familiar but fresh, right? So like, even though Children of Men already exists and was somewhat of a critical and commercial hit, I don't even remember which one came first. You could also make Never Let Me Go, which is because it has slightly different ways into a very similar story, right? So in Children of Men, fertility is almost gone, and a woman who has, is everybody getting that echo?
No.
I don't know.
Okay, good. Now it stopped.
No, man, it's fine now.
Okay. In Children of Men, the thing that made it fresh was the idea that in a future world where fertility is gone, which, by the way, was also the plot of Zardoz, the wonderful Sean Connery movie in the 1970s, right? So, like, nothing's unique, These plots all exist, and it's what you do with them. Zardoz is an insanely campy, almost action comedy. It's like a really strange take on what if in the future there was no fertility, right? So, but what I'm just searching for something in The Guardian that says, Nicole wrote this. She's got something new to say about a future world where fertility is a problem and women are enslaved.
Well, I was actually thinking about changing it a bit and having it be more about actually the designer babies. So my thought was that I was going to rewrite it, probably a page 1 rewrite, and have the storyline be actually about the idea that when we do all of these genetic, changing and all of that, that it would be about the criminal world. So there's supposed to be a criminal gene that is being isolated, like right now. And so the thought was that I could change the storyline, instead of it being about the surrogates, actually being about the child. And so the child comes from a criminal background, and somehow he manages to get through all of the, the genetic editing and all that stuff that happens. And he happens to be really talented and is a violinist. So like it would change pretty radically from that. But I thought, that could happen very well. And it seems as though people are having designer babies not too far in the future. So that was something that I was toying with having Mariana actually saving this child who is a talented violinist. But just because he comes from a criminal background, should we eradicate people because of that reason? So that was kind of the thought that I might go with.
Another concept that I deal with a lot with my clients and with writers on projects is, and this is actually, it'll be funny because the word I use is the integrity of the project, right? And by that I don't mean integrity in terms of like being, a good actor, behaving well. I mean integrity in like the best scripts come from a deep place where writers sort of have to tell a story. It's not like, oh, I like this movie, so I'll imitate it. That's a really shitty reason to write a script, right? The good scripts come from that place of, I have to write this, right? So I think that in The Guardian, you were being, you clearly had a lot of integrity and deep feeling about women's reproductive rights, the treatment of women, what it means to be in a society where, you know, people want to control who gets to and who doesn't get to have a baby. If you're going to switch it to the notion of designer babies, then you have to dig deeper again. Forget for a minute that Mariana ever existed.
Yeah.
Forget that the Guardian ever existed. I mean, I know that's difficult to do, but you will be better off if you start from a new place of integrity and say, what do I feel about having designer babies?
Oh, I feel very strongly about it because I have an autistic daughter. So
that's coming from a very strong place, right? Like, and you would probably make the case that you would do nothing different. You wouldn't want to have genetically modified your baby to have one who's going to be, you know, a gymnast or a model or whatever, right? Like the different kinds of choices that parents make. So don't ever start with plot. Plot flows from character and theme, right?
Right.
Not the other way around. Unless you're writing a super high concept comedy like Ted, right? Where everything does flow from the fact that you have a talking teddy bear who's actually alive with a potty mouth, right? And then that's all plot driven, right? So I think in this mentorship, what we should start to do now is work on why do you want to write a movie about designer babies? How do you want the audience to feel at the end of that movie? What do you want the audience to be thinking about at the end of that movie? How do you best elicit those emotional and intellectual responses from an audience, right? Whose character is the best to tell that POV from? A mother, a child, a doctor? I mean, there are a million ways to go, right? But you have to find that protagonist that's the best entree into this world, right? So start clean. Because I actually don't think Mariana is an interesting character. And I don't think she's an interesting character for the story you now want to tell, right? The sort of cop character who has to get involved in a lot of chases to either, you know, run away from or run towards something to save someone is a stock character.
Okay.
Right? What you want to find is a fresh character that only you could write, who also then gets into raised stakes, you know, rising conflict, a strong narrative engine. But that doesn't have to be, you can get to life and death stakes without having Mariana. You don't need someone, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So tell me more about how you would want the audience to feel and what you would want the audience to be thinking about at the end of this movie, the new one.
How would I want the audience to feel about it? Let's see. It's hard to put it into words. I think that if I'm coming from my own personal perspective about what it's like to have an autistic kid, I would want people to understand that differences are good. This is something that we need. We need to have people from all sorts of backgrounds because sameness and not having uniqueness is, you know, something in the world that I think like if we eradicated art, for instance, because we decided that, you know, some sort of personality was one that would be a better personality to have, or those types of things. It just, I don't know, it's hard to put it into words, I think. Exactly how I feel about that.
It is, and this is, but to me, as a manager and a producer, this is the most important starting place, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're not clear on how you want the audience to feel and think at the end of the movie, they won't feel and think that way. The movie will not move them or not make them think because you will have written it nebulously, right? So so you need, this is your first piece of homework. Start to really clarify a strong statement of why you want to write this movie and how you want the audience to feel about differences, even different, like, when I was a kid, there was a book that I loved by Ira Levin, who was a best-selling author, and every single one of his books became movies. And he wrote a little science fiction book that actually never did become a movie called Anthem, and it was about a future where everybody was genetically engineered, and there was a boy who had one blue eye and one brown eye, and that was enough of a difference to make him an outcast. And as a teenager, we all feel like we're so different. So that book really affected me. Now as an adult, I look back at that book, and it's a very thin book, and it never became a movie because it's really a parable. It's pretty simple-minded, right?
Right.
You're dealing with something much more complicated when you're asking the question about the full range of humanity. Having an autistic child or having a child with other kinds of either physical or mental disabilities raises all these questions about, what are we as human beings, and what kind of, I'm repeating your question. What differences among us as humans really mean, right? Like we can get angry at people who are almost identical to us, except there's a slight difference, So now you want to raise the stakes to like fighting for the rights of people who are very different than us in a society where you could control that. So, I think the homework now for you is to reconceptualize this, starting with that theme and starting with that emotional narrative, and then start to choose your protagonist. Who's the person where that conflict lives in them in the biggest way and leads you to the most interesting obstacles and conflicts to make the movie really powerful.
I agree.
Yeah. We have a few more minutes. Let me just give you some kind of just some structural feedback and just some other notes in terms of having read The Guardian. That film also lacked clarity on who was our protagonist, mm-hmm. and why their wants and needs are going to drive this movie, right? So like at the beginning, we're at the Stork Surrogate Institute, and we meet Mariana, but we also meet Irina and Lara, and then Lara dies, and I'm still not really sure. Like, you can have dual protagonists, or you can have an ensemble drama, but I really was struggling with, like, who am I caring about in this story? Who am I following? Why am I following them? And when it sort of became Mariana that I was really kind of following, right? Yeah. I felt like, this is an odd choice. Like, she's kind of dull. I don't, other than her flashbacks to her army background, right, she's just a delivery person. Like, you created a much more interesting character in Irina, but she's really kind of your secondary character. She's the MacGuffin, and Mariana is your lead character, right? So you never, the only person who can be more interesting than your protagonist is your antagonist, and usually that's only in an action movie. Like, in a lot of ways, I still think Die Hard is one of the best action movies ever made because Alan Rickman was even more interesting than Bruce Willis, right? So that's okay in an action movie because the hero is only as good as the villain. If you don't have a hard villain to take down, you're not giving your hero enough of a chance, right? Enough of a set of rising conflicts, you know. But you want to write like a drama that's emotional and where we're on a real heartfelt ride with the protagonist, not so much like an action-packed ride with the protagonist, you know? So I do think that that's where the homework is, to figure out in this new movie about designer children, which character is going to have the strongest want and need so that an audience tuning into this, you know, buying that $17 ticket at the ArcLight says, wow, that was really powerful. I never thought about what it would be like to be that parent or that doctor or that child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I relate to it because I am a parent or I am a child or I have a doctor and I know that they have to make tough choices. But boy, the choices that parent, child, doctor had to make were really interesting and unusual and have made me feel something and think. So that was 20 minutes. So unfortunately, I should move on. But are you clear on what to do for next week?
I am very clear on that. Thank you.
Okay. So next is Ori. You had submitted after Nicole, according to my email. So Ori, Original Skin, pilot. Television is a different medium than film. You have to think about it differently. You have to analyze it differently. There are a whole set of different questions you have to ask yourself. The original pilot has completely changed the television business. It didn't exist until The Shield. The Shield was the first show to be put on television based on a pilot that a writer wrote for free. Every other TV show before that was a deal where people rose up the food chain, you know, starting as a staff writer, moving up for 10 or 15 years in the TV world, and then they got a deal with a studio, or they at least got the opportunity to pitch to studios, and the studios would commission shows from them. Some of those shows would get turned into pilots, and some of those pilots would get turned into TV shows, right? The Shield changed all that. Nobody thought it was really going to stick. Everybody thought it was just a desperate act by a basic cable channel trying to compete with the networks. But then when ABC did the same thing with Desperate Housewives, everything changed. And suddenly, like, everybody was interested in these original pilots. And then television changed. We went from 3 networks to 4 networks to 5 networks to 5 networks plus pay cable to 5 networks plus pay cable plus basic cable to we now have like 55 buyers of scripted content or more. I lost count. So the original pilot is probably the best thing that any writer who wants to be in the entertainment business and make a living in it can be writing right now, because it opens the most doors. It has the most opportunities. So it's smart of you to choose that. I mean, I still love features, and I'm a baby boomer, and we're the cinema generation. So like, I always will prefer cinema over television, but my business is much more in television now than it is in cinema. That's just the reality. There are only 6 major studios. They all make shitty pixel movies, you know, and if they're not in the Star Wars universe or the Marvel universe or some other universe, they don't even seem to care, you know?
Yeah.
So when you set out to write an original pilot, you're making a whole set of different kind of assumptions and decisions than some of the ones that I was just talking about with Nicole when you're choosing to write a feature, right? Like,
yeah.
Television is really a much stricter business. Films are almost a hobby. Because if you're not going to get hired to write a Marvel movie or a DC movie or a Star Wars movie, you're writing a passion project that you're just hoping someone's going to finance and make. Or you're a writer-director hoping to make this thing yourself, get into a film festival, and launch your career as a writer-director, right? But television is a sausage factory. It's a business. If there's not something on at 9 o'clock on TNT, they got a big problem. They gotta make the sausage. 22 episodes on the networks, 13 episodes on the basic cables, 8 to 10 episodes on the streamers and the pay cables, right?
Yep.
So all of this is an introduction to say to you, what TV show is this like? What network is this going to be on? Is it an 8 o'clock show, a 9 o'clock show, a 10 o'clock show? Is it a digital streaming show? Is it a basic cable show? Television I love television in a way because it is a real business. You actually know what TNT wants to program. You know what HBO wants to program. You know the difference between an FX comedy and a Comedy Central comedy and a CBS comedy. They're all different, and you can define them, right? So for you, sitting down to write an original pilot, you've got to begin with, like, what is this show like, and where does it fit in the TV universe? So now that is actually a question.
Oh, okay.
And I'll allow you to talk.
Okay, I'd say that my comps are Altered Carbon, and basically Altered Carbon meets The Wire. And basically I'd say the home I'm looking for it would be mostly digital streaming. I mean, possibly HBO, but mostly like Netflix or something like that.
Okay, so let's dig into your comps.
Okay.
I always find it fascinating when people give me comps. Tell me about Altered Carbon.
Well, the thing is that I'm not a big fan of Altered Carbon. I mean, I think, okay,
Yeah.
I mean, so like, I think that this is something that sort of like my show could conceivably do better. But I mean, Altered Carbon is kind of like a Blade Runner-ish sci-fi, hard-boiled noir thing in a world where people have these like stacks in the backs of their heads where they can like download their personalities into different bodies.
Yep. And so
And I don't need to, yeah.
how much more complex is the world than that? In other words, if you compare it to the world of 2018, and Altered Carbon takes place, 10 years into the future or whenever it's supposed to be, how many other differences are there between our world and the world of Altered Carbon?
I'm sorry, the world we live in or the world of my script?
No, our world and the world of Altered Carbon.
Oh, well, I mean, it's entirely, I mean, it's crazily different. I mean, like people do, I mean, in terms of character, people do kind of like stuff that is hopefully understandable to people watching in the 21st century. But I mean, the world itself is crazily different. People are on different planets. People have functional immortality. There's like intelligent computers. So it's like wildly different. I mean, one of the reasons why I don't like Altered Carbon is that I guess in order to make sort of like a relatable show, people act in the same way that we do today in a world that has like this incredible technology that would theoretically make them act in a completely different way. But again, like the characters have to be relatable. So you basically take, like a 1940s gumshoe and sort of like stick them into a world of spaceships and stuff like that.
Right. So I agree with that Altered Carbon. I mean, now the other thing to remember about Altered Carbon is it's based on very successful IP.
Yeah.
And it's a very expensive show. So very expensive shows are almost always based on very successful IP because the networks don't like to take big risks on very expensive shows. So when you start to look at the world of science fiction television and epic television, whether it's Westworld or Game of Thrones or Altered Carbon or Battlestar Galactica or, so many other of these shows, when the networks are going to pony up that kind of dough, they're going to do it almost always based on, the Philip K. Dick anthology series. Black Mirror is the only one that's fresh and new, and that's because it's from England. So again, when I was talking about opportunity costs with Nicole, you have to kind of look at that when you start to think about, okay, if I'm going to sit down and write an original pilot, and every episode is going to cost, $8-10 million because it all has to be generated with CGI, and it's got enormous amounts of special effects in virtually every scene, or prosthetics or something. right? But that's all expensive. You have to ask yourself, can I compete with the shows that are going to be based on all of these best-selling science fiction novels or pre-existing IP like Battlestar Galactica, et cetera, right? Now, switch to your other comp, The Wire. Tell me about The Wire.
Well, The Wire is basically, obviously, The Wire is, to a lot of people, myself included, like just an absolute, classic show. Complicated. You have to pay attention. Lots of stuff going on, including subtle stuff that you have to watch a couple of times to really get what's happening. And in terms of like what it's about, it's like this giant story about how this, I would argue that it's this story about like how this one thing, which is the drug economy, kind of like twists these people's lives out of shape and thus sort of like twists the life of an entire city out of shape.
I agree that Baltimore is the protagonist.
Yeah.
And over 5 years, through almost like, and both of the guys who created it were former journalists, right?
Yeah.
So through sort of this very specific, very realistic journalistic detail, it takes you through, you're right, a lot of thematic complexity about how drugs and the war on drugs have made the protagonist grow and change, right?
Yeah.
Baltimore grows and changes as a result of drugs and the war on drugs, right? But that is extremely reality-based, almost cinema verite style, heavily researched, right? So to me, that's not a comp at all for Original Skin.
Okay.
Like zero similarity. Like usually, at least most comps have some similarity. Like I can't see any similarity at all. Like I would think much more, in addition to Altered Carbon, that you would actually pick something maybe even animated or anime or manga. Like to me, it's much more akin to Ghost in the Shell or Cowboy Bebop or things that were based on Japanese anime or Japanese manga, right?
Yeah. Ghost in the Shell. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, when you're if you want to do the incredibly ambitious thing of creating original sci-fi concept that is going to ask a network to spend a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
You have a different focus than most TV shows, which are completely predicated on character, much more so even than film. Like in film, even with the process I just went through with Nicole, right? In film, you do start with a kind of plot concept, right? Designer babies.
Mm-hmm.
And then you develop the characters whose arcs will lay out that plot. So the plot actually drives the characters, right? And that's what I just did with Nicole. I said, okay, if you want to make a thematically rich movie about that, who are the characters that will then drive your plot, right? Television is usually the opposite. You start with a really strong character. In the first season of The Wire, which is the one I know the best because, I did watch that one kind of consistently, you're starting with this cop who's involved in the war on drugs. And you're sort of, his character, his undercover work, his life is now going to slowly build plot as we learn about Baltimore policing and the drug world through his POV, right?
Yeah.
In your kind of show, you're really starting with world building. And you're saying, how can I build a world that's conceptually fresh, but still feels like a TV show that people understand and was a hit, right? Or at least understand and was well received, And then what is my new wine in the old bottle, right? Because you have to be, television, again, it's very specific. I tune in each week because I'm inviting these characters and that story into my home because it's what I want at that hour. Or if I'm binge watching it, I check out the first one, and if I like it, I watch all 10 because I like it.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So my problem with Original Skin, and by the way, you have a great imagination, and within scenes, there's great stuff. You have some great visuals, you have some really fun dialogue, you do have some original concepts, but it's like, it's all over the place. You know, you've got like body mods, you've got, you know, like the kinds of drugs that are in the Fallout series. I mean, you even have Mentats, you know, which are one of the drugs in Fallout, you know. So you've got drug modification. You've got people plugging in, like in William Gibson, you know, style. You've got Cro-Magnons. You've got Neanderthals. You're doing so much world building that there's no rules at all. Everything's off the table. People have claws. People have this. People are cheetahs. People are human. People are robots. It's like, I'm just totally lost. And you can do that in an anime or a manga because it's all just drawn anyway, right? Yeah. And to a certain extent, turning people into cheetahs or turning people into lobster claws or turning people into half robot, half humans is great for animation because animation mostly wants to have huge imagination that would be too expensive to realize in live action.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But this is a live action show. So like your homework assignment is twofold. One, what's the best concept you've gotten here? And don't answer that now. Think about it, right? Like, is it the fact that they've used Neanderthal DNA and Cro-Magnon DNA to create new subspecies of Homo sapien that are then treated differently by society? Well, that's cool. I've never seen that before. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't want body modification. I don't want plug-in receptors in my brain. I don't want mentats and drugs and, you know, because those all have their own world-building rules that I'm familiar with from William Gibson or from, you know, Altered Carbon or you know what I mean, or from anime and manga, right? Like like you have to decide what world you're building, and then the rules have to be very consistent and very recognizable. I highly recommend you watch a show called Reverie if you haven't already watched it. That's on NBC, I think. I've only read the pilot, but it is one of the only shows to make it to television, totally original. You know, it's not based on IP. And the rule in that show is that, you know, an Elon Musk, everybody always uses Elon Musk type genius has invented a new technology that allows people to lucid dream. And people want this technology because then you can do whatever you want in your dreams. You can fly, you can, you know, swim underwater forever. You can, you know, do whatever you want, right? And then the setup, the hook, is that it's revealed there's a huge secret. A couple of people are starting to not come out of the lucid dream state. And so our protagonist, our heroine, is a former hostage negotiator. And the other big hook secret is they've also invented the next level of the technology where they can place someone else into someone's lucid dream state.
Okay.
And now she's got to go in and solve the mystery of why these people are stuck in their lucid dreams. Right? But so the world building is very specific. The rules are all about dreams.
Well, it's Inception, isn't it?
Yes and no. I mean, watch the show. It's a little...
Yeah, I'll check it out.
It's a little different. Like, yes and no. And again, I think because Inception, to me, is really just a video game where you sort of level up in complexity and level up in power and then take down the bad guy and then the movie's over. You know, it's got a very simple video game narrative. This is actually after something a little more complex, you
Mhm.
know. I don't think it actually works. I mean, the same way that you don't think Altered Carbon works, I don't think this works, which is why I haven't tuned into the show.
Mhm.
But it is interesting that it's an example of how someone did use an existing familiar sci-fi technology, but in a slightly new way, and kind of coupled it with a police procedure.
Mhm.
You know, and that became a network TV show.
Yeah.
So it's a good paradigm for you. In
Yeah.
that sense, you know, the other thing that I would argue is you in television, even though it's show don't tell, you need so much text on the page to keep building your world that most readers wouldn't get through the first act. You've got to write more dialogue-driven scenes, and you've got to use the dialogue not just for exposition, which is again in world building such a natural thing to do because you've got so many things that are different than our present world.
Mhm.
But you've got to find ways that the dramatic conflict in the scene leads to dialogue that isn't just expository. It's also about what your female cop is going through. Like one of the you know reactions I had as I read the script that's just like audience feedback is like every single scene in this show is a cop shop scene. Like I know nothing about this woman's life other than her cop and her body modification. Right? And like all television, regardless of whether it's contemporary, future, past, comedy, drama, it's all soap opera, ultimately.
Yeah.
It's all, who do they love? Who do they hate? Who are their parents? Who are their children? Who are their families? You know, all those conflicts and character things are why I return each week, right? Yeah. You know, she has one great relationship with the lion dude.
Yeah.
And that's it. And that's a cop relationship, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's not even a will they, won't they romantic relationship because he's a Neanderthal with lobster claw.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you really need to think about where's the soap opera?
Yeah.
Like, you know, why do I care about this woman? Like, I like the idea that she's this sort of plump, not particularly attractive woman without all the body mods. But so does she live with her mom? Does she live with her sister? You know, does she have a boyfriend, but he sucks? You know, it's like, these are the things that draw me back each week.
Mm-hmm.
And those are missing from your script.
Mm-hmm.
Does that resonate, or does that seem harsh?
Oh, I mean, it totally resonates, but I mean, I guess my problem is that that's kind of like by design. I mean, like, because like, I totally understand what you're saying. And I agree that this is like something that isn't there, but I took it out of there because I wanted it to be about sort of like the loss of sort of like human connection and the loss of the loss of like emotional connectivity between people outside of work. Yeah. But if that's a problem, it's obvious it's a problem.
It's a problem. I got to move on because we've gone over the 20 minutes, but yeah, it's what my writing teacher in college told me, which is, there are certain choices you make as a writer where you hoist yourself by your own petard, which I then have to look up. Do you know the phrase?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
You're blowing yourself up with your own fireworks, right?
Yeah.
And in my case, it was I was trying to write a story about boredom, and he was like, "Boredom is boring. You have now written yourself into a corner, you know." And it's the same thing with you. If you want to create a TV show. TV shows are about human relationships.
Yeah.
That's what we come back to every week. So you're going to hoist yourself by your own petard if you're saying, no, but I'm better than that. I am not going to have any human relationships.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you may write a really fresh original script. I mean, again, you guys are the top tier writers and you've got you have good scene structure. You got a lot of stuff going for you. But like sometimes I'll do panels with like, you know, totally novice writers and they'll pitch me an idea that's so wacky and like not like I literally have to ask them, I'm sorry, do you watch any television? like what TV show is that like? You know? And they're like, well, that's the whole point. It's not like anything. And I'm like, right. And that's why no one will ever read it or buy it. You know, because it's an industry. And you are, I mean, I don't mean this pejorative at all because I love the business, but you are making sausage.
Yeah.
You just want to make really high quality sausage.
Yeah.
You know, with really good meat. And then figure out what's the Ori spice. Do I add a little jalapeno? Do I add a little Asiago cheese? You know, do I add a little quinoa? Is it a vegetarian sausage? You know, I mean, there are a lot of ways to make great sausage, and there's some Ori sausage out there that's great.
Yeah.
But if you say it's a sausage and I look at it and it's a fucking piece of kale,
yeah,
I ain't gonna buy it.
Yeah.
I hate kale.
All right, we got to move on. So your homework assignment is, I like a lot of your world building. Throw out 9/10 of it.
Okay.
You know, find the one great piece of your world building that you're the most excited about. Focus on that. And then ask yourself which characters live in that world. And I like the relationship between Janet and the lion as a cop shop relationship.
Yeah.
Right? But like, who are they as people?
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Will do. Thanks a lot, Peter.
No, thank you. I mean, I can only talk this much about all your guys' work because there's stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that unfortunately, when you work with novice writers, you kind of go, well, you wrote a script.
Yeah.
You know, there's like nothing to talk about. So, okay. Heather, are you on?
Yes.
Let me start differently with you. What is your background?
Let's see. I'll go backwards. Most recent, I've been working in animation for many years in design and development. I started at Disney, was there 10 years, and then was at DreamWorks, Jim Henson. And I'm not resume listing. I'm just,
No. It's great. Great companies.
Yeah. So I was, I started in traditional animation, which was great at Disney because it was, Roy Disney was still there and everything. So they would do this thing where they would, every year, whenever we had downtime, which at that point was frequent because they would keep everybody in between projects. They would train us in story, and their goal when you started at Disney is to move you up through the ranks, essentially, potentially looking for directors. So I did that and gotten involved with a lot of that. Part of that, though, I was actually a zoology student in university. So I did artwork when I was in school, but I studied zoology, so I did science and technology and animal care for many years prior to getting hired at Disney. So
okay.
Story how the two met, but that's too long.
Did you ever serve in the military?
I did not. No.
And does your spouse or your children or your good friends or anybody serve in the military?
I'm from Ohio, so I was around a lot of military, and I went to Ohio State, and I was friends with tons of people in the military. Ohio State has a huge
ROTC
base anyways, and then the university is very generous to military student or military people that are in the military and students. So I knew a lot of military.
Why this story? Why did you choose to write this?
Okay, so essentially, because there's two things happening in this script, as you've seen, like with the Me Too kind of thing, and I hate the Me Too phrase, but so that is kind of a through line because I knew a lot of people that went through that in the military, female-wise, but also myself working, and I won't name which company or where, but working in different corporate situations.
Similar situations.
It was very similar dramatics that I was completely shocked at how flagrant and in your face and how pressury they would get. And if you even uttered a complaint, all of a sudden you were the one that they were pursuing to shred to pieces. So of course, a script about the corporate world would probably be not so fun. So I kind of wanted to combine the worlds of where that's happening to a person that's actually entrapped in a situation where they can't leave. Because
Right.
you put it in a corporate world setting, they're just like, well, just quit. What's the deal?
Which is part of the pushback on the Me Too movement for people who don't really understand, A, that's not so easy, or B, you just really like your job, so why should you have to put up with it, et cetera. But you're right, it definitely raises the stakes to not sort of say, well, it's just happening at an advertising agency, so why doesn't she just find a new advertising agency?
Right. Yeah. I mean, because it becomes life and death in this world, because it's genuine. I've interviewed and talked with Kirby Dick, who did that
Yeah.
documentary all about
Yep.
the military.
Yep.
And he said literally the women there are literally always just thinking about suicide because they can't get out. So that was my thinking behind putting those two worlds together.
Yeah. So, I mean, I asked all this because you've kind of identified the two gut level reactions that I had to the script, right? One of which is that there are a lot of military shows on the air. There were a bunch after 9/11, and then they came back again after Trump's victory because the networks all decided that they had to appeal to the red states. So they started doing SEAL Team 6 and, all these other military shows, right? Mm-hmm. And they're written with an incredible precision of military jargon, military speak, weapon jargon, all of that stuff. There's so many people who either did serve and became writers or are just, got the kind of usually guys who read Jane's Military Aircraft and, all of those gun magazines and all that stuff. And the script did not have that level of authenticity and specificity of the military world, right? Like every year I try to read as many of the pilots as I can. And when I read one of these scripts that's set in this military world, there's just a precision to to all of that military jargon. In other words, like you start to set the bar very high when you're writing a show like this because you're competing with all of these people who just have this wealth of knowledge about all that stuff. Like just as an example, at one point, Maya says something about, we're going to go off book, right? And like, maybe that's a military term, but I don't think so. I mean, to me, that's a entertainment term, where you go off script, you go off book, right? I'm pretty sure that the military would say that differently, right?
Okay.
So I mean, and I know you're going to say, oh, like one little example, but like that was just the one that I wrote down. Yeah. But there were lots of them, you know what I mean? All through where I kind of felt like that's off.
Yeah. Well, but so just like a background on this particular script, I was working on it in a writing workshop with Pat Charles, who's one of the producers of Black Lightning. And I was asking him about that. And he was, because I said I'm not military and I'm not going to try and pretend I am.
Yeah.
And his thinking on it was just keep moving forward and just have a sample of just entertainment value. And that was some of the things that, in his opinion, and his producing was saying that that's where the show's now, they're on the air for a little bit and go back off because they've gotten so focused on that aspect that they've lost the heart of the character aspect. And that's why they pop on and pop off the air.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, do I even go in this world? Because
but that's where like what I was talking to Nicole about and a little bit with the others. I never come from the marketplace in any of my notes until much later.
Right. Yeah.
To me, it's about and I'll use the word again, the integrity of why do you want to write this? Why do you have to tell this story? And why, if I'm a manager or an agent or a studio executive, am I going to read this and say, wow, this feels like a Heather Shepard script, right? Because this is what we're all looking for, you know, especially to launch your career these days, right? Because it's not like the old days where you wrote a spec episode of a show that's on the air, copied that voice, got a job as a staff writer, moved up the food chain, and then eventually, hopefully, got to write about what you cared about, right? Now you're just jumping in and writing about what you theoretically care about,
Right.
you know? So then I come to that, what you absolutely began with, which is there is a kind of lack of a mesh between the misogyny and abuse in the military story, you know, how difficult it is to be a female in the contemporary American military, with what's almost like 3 acts of just pure action in terms of, you know, okay, we're going into an ISIS stronghold and we're going to kill a lot of ISIS fighters and we're going to rescue a hostage. Like, those are 2 different TV shows.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess cause my comp was kind of Homeland, where she's dealing with a lot of essential like BS back at home. So she kind of goes off and does go, I guess the phrase off book is wrong, but like she does, I wasn't copying that show, but
no, it's good to have paradigms, and it's good to think about why they work and how they work, and then how that affects, you know, what you're trying to do, right?
I just didn't want it to appear, I was very careful about like being anti-man and having every guy be a jerk to her, because that's not the reality either. Like, I've worked at studios where I have one boss that's on me 24 hours a day, but nobody knows because I don't go back to my desk and talk about it.
Right.
I just do my work, and everybody, all my peers think everything's great, but I have this one person that's like, every time I shut the door, and I'm ordered to shut the door in an office. And there's a whole world of what's happening on dealing with that behind the scenes of dealing with my everyday, you know, path.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. That's why I don't know if like the reality of what women are dealing with behind closed doors is actually just not realized by everybody. But I get the whole, like, I've even wondered how they feel different, because she's dealing with this, then she goes out and does her mission, and then she comes back. And I kind of was just trying to get across the idea that in this scenario for her, no matter what she does, even how great she is out there, it's going to come back that this guy is never going to let it be. And it's her overcoming that.
And so I think that the other thing is, and this is a real balancing act, right? An original pilot, if you're, you know, fortunate enough to have that incredibly rare thing of that someone actually is going to make it, right? You're always balancing, like, there's a phrase we use a lot in development where you say you got to shoot all your bullets in the pilot, because if you don't, no one's ever going to see the great bullet you shot in episode 6, because you'll never get to write or see episode 6, right? So on the one hand, that's true. But on the other hand, television burns a much slower fuse than features. Yeah. And as I've been saying to a bunch of the folks, it's much more about characters and their relationships driving the plot, right? And so I sort of feel like you did choose to kind of shoot all your bullets in the pilot, right? So we barely meet Maya and her captain tries to rape her, right? And then she presses charges, all in the pilot, right? Where I actually think that if you start to think about this show as coming from the integrity of, I really want to examine what it's like to be a successful combat woman in the Army. In other words, I'm not doing this in the Pentagon. She's not behind a desk, right? It's, as you say, it's not an office-based show. I'm not setting this in the entertainment industry or the advertising industry. And even in the military, I'm not setting this in the Pentagon behind a desk. I want to go to the theater of war but also explore how difficult it is to be a woman in the military, right?
Yeah.
I think that you would benefit from burning a much slower fuse.
I was headed in that direction, and then I was told no one's seeing episode 2 because nothing exists yet.
But that doesn't mean you don't have
Exactly.
really powerful stakes in episode 1, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying, hey, write an episode where everything's hunky-dory and nothing happens, because you're right. You know, the way I word it, and in development terms it's usually worded, is like the pilot does have to have an escalated why now, right? An elevated why now, right? And then individual episodes may actually have lower stakes, but the pilot sort of is this elevated why now, right? So, I mean, I'll just riff with you on this, right? Like, let's say, you know, Maya's already in country, right?
Right.
But she's not a squad leader yet. The elevated why now is they're going to make her a squad leader, right? And then in conjunction with that, given your instincts, and I think they're right, and there's something off about her relationship with this captain.
Mm-hmm.
She can't trust him, right?
Right.
And the audience, you're establishing much more mystery. Well, can she trust him or can't she trust him? He just promoted her, right?
Right.
But why is he also being kind of handsy? You know?
Yeah.
But maybe I'm overemphasizing the handsiness, like, as a viewer, right? So now you're establishing mystery. There's a reason for me to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Maya is this, I like her. She's a powerful character. She's ambitious. She wants to be a squad leader.
Mm-hmm.
There are male soldiers around her who support that. There are male soldiers around her who don't support that. So as you say, not all the guys are assholes.
Right. Yeah.
Now there's a captain. He's the only one who can make her a squad leader. He chooses to. But in so doing, he's handsy, or he says something really inappropriate about how good she would look in her civvies. I mean, I don't know. You know what I mean? But like, so now you have elevated stakes and you have a strong why now, but you haven't sort of gotten to what really should be the cliffhanger of season 1, which is she going to press charges and destroy her military career?
Right. Okay.
You see what I mean? Like, you sort of, you know, as they say in Spinal Tap, you know, you've already gone to 11.
Right.
And she's already been raped and she's already pressed charges, which 3 different people tell her will destroy her military career.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm also just replaying how I would change this. Sorry.
Well, no, I think your homework assignment really is to look at, you know, this is not about, this show is much less about killing ISIS officers and I mean, ISIS terrorists and, you know, big missions and calling in the, you know, cavalry and all that stuff. This is about the already tense environment of being in country and in combat raised to the next level because you're a woman.
Yeah. I guess that's what I was trying to get across, but I think like it's just happening so fast.
It's happening so fast that you're not leaving any mystery for the audience. You're not inviting the audience in. You're telling them everything.
Yeah, and it's funny, when I first started this, I had actually more parallel that you would see, not equal amount of scenes, but you saw actually the life of the hostage that she's trying to get out more. And it just it was kind of a parallel of who's the real hostage in this situation?
Well, that might, look, that I'm intrigued by that too, right? Like, especially if this is going to be a season-long kind of serialized idea that the you know how they kind of, they'll talk about sort of, you have medium bads and a big bad, or you have subplots and then the overall plot, right?
Yeah.
So if the overall plot, the big bad is that eventually episode 13, she really is going to have to lead a squad to rescue this American kid, right?
Yeah.
But you're building to that.
Yeah.
And then you're making a really strong thematic point. I mean, I love what you just said about who's more of a captive, her or him.
Yeah. And I think it was stronger when I had it a little bit more, like I'd have maybe in each act, maybe one and 1.5 scenes of him navigating the politics inside this hostage cell. Because I read this entire book about this guy, the Swedish hostage that was in with Pearl, and all of the stuff that they had to deal with. There was politics among the hostages, and they would try and become friendly with the hostage takers.
Absolutely. There's Stockholm syndrome in both directions, you know, and a lot of these ISIS guys are human beings and some of them aren't, you know, I mean, and so like, again, I think you would have a much fresher take on all of this, because again, honestly, you're not going to write combat missions, sneaking through tunnels and shooting people and snipers and airplanes. You know, you're just not going to write that shit as well as people who love that shit, right?
Right.
That's
no, if this ever got picked up, I would pay the guy to do it. Like, change these scenes and
right. But now you've got to write the scripts that are you on you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So I think that, because we've got to move on to the next one, but I think that's your homework assignment, is to like really focus on how do you tell this story so that it's a much more character-driven, emotional drama. I really like this whole idea of twinning the hostages, and that does go to your paradigm, which is in the first season, the twinning of Claire Danes and Damian Lewis, right? They're both mentally ill.
Yeah.
Who's the hero and who's the terrorist, right?
I hadn't even thought about that part of it. Yeah.
So go back and look at how well structured that is, and how that show really keeps us guessing in terms of, do we trust Damian Lewis? Do we not trust Damian Lewis? You know, and look at that as a paradigm for your show. Do we trust Captain whatever his name is? Do we not trust Captain whatever his name is? And how is she going to eventually become related to this guy who's a hostage? Like, at first, that's not even the mission. Her squad is just being sent out to deal with someone who shot a cow. You know? But we're also learning about this hostage, and we know their stories are going to come together in the same way we know that Claire Danes' story and Damian Lewis's story are going to come together over that first season of Homeland.
Right. Okay. Oh shoot, I had a question. I lost it. Okay.
Well, next session.
I know. I got to write them down when I have them, because it's too much time pressure.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Martin.
There's Peter and Heather. There's a British BBC series. It's called Our Girl, which is about a woman's experience of, you know, starting as a trainee soldier, and becoming a soldier, and her whole experience of what it's like being a woman in the military.
In the military, really, and in the press.
There's like 3 series of it. She goes to, she goes to like the jungle, and she goes to Afghanistan. And anyway, it's worth checking out. It sounds like a bit like Sicario, because it's kind of, you know, the first.
That is a good paradigm in terms of how that movie puts Emily Blunt in the middle of it. Yeah.
Oh, Sicario. Okay.
In a man's world. Martin, you're up, actually.
Oh, right, cool. Hey,
what time is it there?
Oh, God, what? It's 20 past 10.
All right, I kept you up past your good.
I apologize, man. I'm sitting in my car in Cornwall.
I kept you up past your bedtime. Sorry.
No, not at all. No, it's no problem.
So, it is more difficult for me to work with you on your script, Martin, because you really do have a British sensibility. And there is a whimsicality and absurdity to your writing that I love about British comedy, going, you know, whether it's Monty Python or, you know, I mean, I grew up with all of the, you know, Dudley Moore and Peter Cook and
Well, that's a compliment in itself.
well, no, I mean, all, you know, there is a kind of absurdity and whimsy to British humor that Americans are less fond of.
Yeah.
You know, American humor tends to be much more reality based and much less comfortable with absurdity, you know, much less comfortable with that kind of whimsicality. And so, like, to me, I have a little bit of a story development problem because, like, I probably would not be a good development executive for a lot of British television shows.
Yeah,
because I don't
for the British market. It's not for the American market. But that's
what I mean. This, like, I don't know who would make this in America, right? Like, it's just not an American TV show. It's an ITV show or a BBC show or a
exactly.
Yeah.
That's
So
try and get an in into that world, you know, just so that, because I'm really intrigued by AI, and I just wanted to write something that would appeal to the British market.
So I mean, I think that I think that makes it complicated for me simply because, you know, talking about character development or talking about tone, you know, and as I began with a lot of the people, I'm all about the audience, right? Like, you've got to think about what is the entertainment value for the audience. And in a way, I don't know your audience. You know it, you know, because you're British. And I know it a little bit because I've seen those shows. And I've seen some of the other, you know, more modern British sitcoms, or I mean, this actually falls into the category that we call a light hour, you know, which means that it has dramatic elements, it has genre elements, but it's going for the humor much more than it's going for the tension or the you know. So like an American paradigm would be something like Castle. You know, where, do you know the show Castle?
No.
Okay, so it ran for, like, I don't know, a decade. It just went off the air a year or two ago, and it stars Nathan Fillion, who was also in Firefly and the Serenity movie, and you know, he's this, like, dashing crime writer who, for no good reason, is sort of teamed up with a tough female cop. And every week they solve crimes.
Okay.
You know, and it's absurd, right? Yeah. Like, why is this dashing, very wealthy? He's a gourmet cook. He loves opera. He, you know, but like he runs around with this tough female cop and solves crime, and no one ever really gets hurt. No, you know, it's always pretty silly. Yeah. You know, but it's not absurd at the level yours becomes, because, as I said, American humor stays much more reality based. So, like, a lot of it has to do with his mother lives with him and his daughter lives with him, and they're both always picking on him. And actually, at home, he's a pussycat, you know, and he has to be tougher when he's on cop duty, and, you know, so, like, it's less absurd and more sort of family cop shop based. You know,
this sounds like fun entertainment.
What's that?
Fun entertainment.
Correct, and that's what, you know. So that's why these light hours are popular on American television. And I mean, I read this, and I mostly enjoyed it. You know, even though it's not my taste, you know, but I did get a kick out of what you were doing. I think that if I were to challenge you on this, I would go after a couple of things. One is that whimsy and absurdity slows your pace, right? There are a lot of scenes where you are sort of treading water.
Okay. Yeah, you mean like the boxing scene, for example?
The boxing scene. I mean, even just as funny as they are, some of the conversations between, you know, like if Ed's just, you know, having it out with Sasha, right? Or Wolfgang and Leopoldo are having it out, right? Like they're often covering things we already know.
Okay, yeah, I hear you, man. It's not.
You know what I
moving
mean? Like
forward.
Ed and Sasha are talking about her pregnancy over and over and over, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
And we know that, and we know that they have a problem in their relationship. So
Yeah.
even in a whimsical, absurd show, you have to ask yourself, how is this scene advancing the plot? Like, what new thing am I learning about their relationship or about his robotics company? Or, you know what I mean? Like, the show,
Yeah. That's a
the
great
scene
point.
has to introduce a new plot element,
Yeah, yeah.
or it has to introduce a new character element. Like, you do really well later when you find out that Sasha's bisexual, you know, and like, which is fun. I mean, it's kind of like, well, why is she with a fat nerd like Ed? But it's sort of like, well, she does like him, and she does want to have his children, although she might prefer to be with a woman, you know? So, like, that scene
Yeah,
did
thanks, man.
did the job, right? Like, it advanced the plot, it advanced the character, it was funny, you know? And I think you gotta go scene by scene and kind of look at some of these scenes and say, you know, and by the way, a good scene does one of those things well, right? A great scene does three things well.
Yeah, yeah.
It advances the plot, it advances the characters, and it raises the stakes and does something unexpected,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So
But I totally accept your point about that. There's, you know, it could really do with some sharpening up.
you're giving yourself a free pass because you're funny and because a lot of the stuff is pretty absurd. So like when you got a ninja spinning around and, you know, cutting people's hands off, you're kind of saying, well, that's entertaining, you know? And you're right, it is entertaining, but is it doing anything?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the idea with her is kind of setting up the conflict for the whole thing. It's kind of, you know, that they've created these AI, and it's a world which they kind of respect, but there's this microcosm
Of it, right.
Yeah, and it's kind of that as a result, they don't know what to expect from these other basically characters who just turn their world upside down. So
Yes.
that, you know,
And then,
there's many stories that can come from it, and that's
So-
why I kind of really like.
I mean, your homework assignment is go back into the script and go scene by scene and annotate in the margins. Is this scene advancing my information about my understanding? Information is a bad word. You don't ever want a scene to just be about information, right? But like, is the scene, you know, advancing my understanding of Ed or of Sasha or of Leopoldo or of Wolfgang, right? So that's the character development. And then 2, is this scene advancing the plot? Have I raised the conflict? Have I raised the stakes? Has this put them in more jeopardy with the Japanese? You know, am I more worried about what Penny's up to? Am I more worried about, you know, the AI escaping or screwing something up, right? Like, am I raising the stakes? Is it rising conflict, right? You know, the third part, which is like, is something unexpected or fresh happening, you seem to have a pretty good handle on. There's always weird shit happening, whether it's the hummingbird or, you know, you have a good imagination. Now, so that's one set of homework assignments for you. The other set of homework assignments for you is sort of the opposite of Ori. Okay, Ori has a huge imagination for science fiction and enormous amounts of interest in world building and bringing in all these different elements of world building and creating a world that really is completely uniquely his own, right?
Ori and I have met before, so I kind of know some of Ori's work.
Okay, so, you know, when you read his work, it's like, wow, there's a lot going on in the world building. And he's very conscious of trying to establish the rules of, like, you know, what does mother do as a drink? Oh, and it makes you steam. And it's the lubricant that makes all these other things work, right? Like he's doing a lot of world building. right?
Yeah.
I have,
There's not
I
enough
have,
room.
you do no world building at all. I have no sense of whether your TV show is taking place in the present or 5 years into the future. I have no sense of whether these guys are like ridiculous geniuses who are so far ahead of the rest of society, you can't understand why they're still operating out of a shitty warehouse. You know, in other words, like if they've really got a sex bot like Claudia and a ninja bot like whatever her name is, are these unique? Are they like 20 years ahead of everybody else? Or
Peter, that's exactly what it is. It's kind of like,
okay, but I don't know that as a reader or as a viewer, right? You're not building the world.
okay.
So
Yeah, that's a great point. So
that's-
somehow
that's
it's kind of
very
like the world
important.
we-
if
it's
you're
kind of
gonna
like- sorry, man. Sorry.
no, it's just any show that leaves reality and adds an element of either fantasy or sci-fi has to establish the rules,
Yeah. Okay,
right?
cool. I mean, I get that completely, of course.
Your buyers are going to be exactly the same as my buyers, right?
Yeah,
They're just going to be British, you know? So your buyers are going to read this script and they're going to go, well, there's a lot of fun stuff here, but I have no fucking idea what's going on. Right? Like, am I in the future where AI exists and there are lots of these robots running around? Or am I in a future where AI exists and there are, you know, decent robots, but they still look pretty mechanical and they're not, and you can't really think they're human. And these guys are just one step ahead. Yeah, it's like, I don't care what your choice is. That's for you to decide. But as the network executive or the manager or the agent who's either going to help sell this for you or buy it, right? They're going to have all these questions.
That's such an interesting point, Pete. It's like there's stuff that's, you know, it's because, you know, it's been worked on a little bit.
Yeah.
There were, you know, there was more world building prior to this draft, kind of. So there was, you know, you could see that there's an antagonist who is Noah, and hopefully you got that kind of.
Yeah.
And he kind of represents the corporate AI. And
right.
There is kind of, in a former draft, there's kind of like you see the level of tech that they're at, which is where we are now, kind of. But these, like you said, these guys are kind of streets ahead.
Yeah.
And living in their own little world. It's kind of, that's
and this is always the problem with any notes or any development, and every writer, you know, hopefully when you become a professional writer, it gets worse and better, right? It gets better because now they're paying you to accomplish their notes. It gets worse because a lot of times the notes suck. But they're paying you, so you have to do them. You know,
no, I hear you completely, man. Obviously,
and it's also always a balancing act, because anybody who tells you, well, focus more on the world building, there's only 60 pages of real estate. So to the extent that you focus on world building, then you're not focusing on character development or plot development. So then the next person who reads it says, hey, you did a good job with the world building, but I think your characters suck. You know, and so part of it, when you get to the level of the really truly professional, and then especially the really truly talented professional writers, what they're really pulling off, as I was saying, is all three in one scene. Right?
Yeah, it's just great. No, thank you, man.
You know, so like if you look at a scene early in the script where like where Ed's having sex with Camille, right? Fun scene, but like pretty familiar. Like everybody immediately goes right to anything AI becoming, you know, fembots in Austin Powers, or I mean, there was even a movie made a long time ago before this really became as big an issue as it is now, called Cherry 2000, you know, which was about a sex bot who kind of goes crazy and starts killing everybody. Fun movie. You should watch it if you've never seen it. And, you know, and or even Sabrina or Her, which are, you know, more serious, but still about like hey, if we could create AI, the first thing we're going to do is create women we men can be in love with and or have sex with, right?
Yeah.
So that puts you already in pretty familiar territory. So take a look at that scene and say, you use that scene to better advantage of like, is Ed trying to have a date with Claudia? And now I'm just pulling this out of my hat and riffing with you, right? But like, you could accomplish more with that scene if Ed is trying to take her on a date. And now the question is, oh, wait, she's the only AI that exists. Will people notice that she's not human?
I thought about another draft is that she's in the opening sequence, which I don't know whether that's too opaque, which is kind of, you know, it's setting up the conflict with the antagonist.
Yes.
Where, you know, kind of Ed's this guy who he's this genius, but people are just like thinking he's a bit of a crackpot.
Yes.
But I thought of having Claudia in that scene where she's actually with him, not with Sasha. And so the AI is with him and she's interacting in this world, but they don't even realize it.
Take a stab at that. That could work well, I think. You know, next time as I go through it more carefully, I'll give you some of my own specific structural notes and places I think where you could cut or places where I think you could be doing things better. But I think your homework assignment is to go in and do those two things. You know, one, really tackle the scenes that are just fun and either cut them or figure out how they do more, right?
That's wonderful. Thanks.
You know, and then two, really start to take notes on the world building. You know, how do you establish that so that the reader knows exactly what science fiction universe we're in? You know, how advanced is this? How common is it? How much experience have other people had with it? You know, so that we know what the rules are.
I hear you, man. Thank you so much. Peter,
all right,
just
cool.
I mean, I could.
You have any questions?
Yeah.
Because we have a couple of minutes left.
Part of this was like, what the hell should I send you? Because, you know, I got a few products that I'd like. I just wasn't sure.
Yeah.
There's one that's also an AI feature, but it's so underdeveloped. So I thought,
let's focus on this because I think you're onto something here. You know, and
but then there's an American script as well that is set in like a town in Colorado, because one of my little businesses is in Colorado, so I'm quite familiar with this world. It's in a ski town in Colorado, so maybe that would appeal to you more. I don't know.
Well, I might be more helpful in a way because at least it would.
It's kind of like a Fargo-esque. It's kind of a black comedy. It's got a comedic tone, but
send it to me for next week because I just feel like I could be more helpful on something that's for my marketplace as opposed to the British marketplace, which I really don't know.
This is what I'm hearing. Okay, I will do. Thanks, Peter. Much appreciated, man.
All right, my pleasure. Ned, you there?
I am here.
Hello again.
Hello, my man.
Is it still lovely up there?
Yeah.
The weather hasn't changed?
Nope. And you've been giving great stuff, man. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay, first of all, because I am an extremely ethical person, I have to reveal to you that I have a client who is working on a similar idea.
What do we do?
Okay. I mean, I'm comfortable with that. I just wanted to put that out there because ideas are in the zeitgeist, and there are a number of people who are working on. Believe me, her idea isn't the only one either. I mean, the whole idea, it's Skynet and the Terminator, right? Like the whole idea that the AI could turn on us is been around forever. There was, so that core idea has been around forever. Her idea is similar but different, in terms of which device is turning on her protagonist and how it turns on her, right? But I just wanted to bring that
up. That's good. I totally appreciate that. But I think this will will be different because you only got Act One there, right? It's very compressed, right?
Oh yeah, no, I want to work on it with you. I just want you to be comfortable with the fact that I didn't steal your idea and give it to one of my clients.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
it's like,
no, good enough. We have you on record. Thank you, man.
yeah.
There you go.
So, my big note, my notes for you are all, well, no, they're a lot. I mean, okay. First of all, I think it's a good idea. I told my client I think it's a good idea. I will tell you I think it's a good idea, right? I think we are all wrestling with the notion of what happens when AI becomes as smart or smarter than we are and potentially becomes dangerous. And I think that the fact that this AI is now, you know, that our refrigerator is an AI and our phone is an AI has changed the whole concept of why that would be dangerous or how that would be dangerous from the Terminator and Skynet and all those earlier versions where it was sort of like, oh, the robots take over the world. You know, it is different now because, you know, we hold a device in our hand and it's like, oh, that's an AI, you know? So I think you're onto something.
And we're dependent on them now, like never before, right? It's
yeah, I mean, and you know, it's funny because geniuses are geniuses, and whatever you may or may not think of Woody Allen in terms of his personal issues, even before he was a movie maker, he had a comedy album in which he did a routine where he mistreated his toaster, and then when he got into the elevator, the elevator mistreated him. And it's a really funny routine because even then you were starting to have elevators that would say 4-7, you know, ladies' garments, and you know, and so that was the riff that he was going on. Anyway, here are my gut level reactions to your first act. Okay. One, you write really fun dialogue, but you rely on it way too much. And all your characters pretty much end up sounding the same. In other words, there is a place for banter, and there is a place for clever dialogue. But if all of your characters banter, and if all of your characters use playful language sort of all the time, it gets very samey. And even though there's slight differences in, let's say, between the way Billy talks and the way his business guy friend talks, right?
Right.
It's still rhythmically a very similar banter, as are his conversations with the sleazy salesman, as are his conversations with Sora, as are his conversations with his girlfriend. You know what I mean? So you really, you know, having an ear for banter and having an ear for good dialogue is important. Regulating when you use it and when you don't use it makes it much more effective. So, like, right off the bat, a car salesman is going to have a very different, even if you want to write great dialogue for a car salesman, right? The way he's going to manipulate a guy like Billy, which you do well, but they end up sound like I ended up having to kind of actually look at the character names to make sure I wasn't reading it wrong. Like they sounded the same, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would really like you to look at.
So what would you suggest as far as ways to differentiate them?
Well, I mean, all right. So it always comes back to, for every character in the overall movie, and then each scene in the movie is like a movie in and of itself, right? Every scene should, in a sense, have the same kind of 3-act structure as the whole movie, right? And so in the same way, you have to think about what your protagonists want, what's your protagonists need, what are your protagonists' flaws, which usually relate to their needs that keep them from getting what they want, right? That creates conflict, and then conflict creates drama or comedy, right? So at the top of every scene, ask yourself, let's do it. Let's do it as an exercise. Movie begins. Billy goes in to buy an autonomous car. What does Billy want? What does Billy need? What's Billy's flaw?
Okay, so he wants the latest, greatest. He's a techophile.
Yep.
His flaw would be sort of his narcissism, I would say, in the sense that
he's self-involved. Absolutely.
A showboat guy.
Yep.
He wants a showboat, literally, figuratively, and his conflict is money. His conflict is he's about to get engaged, and what comes first, the engagement or the showboat, right? The car.
Yep. And what does the salesman want, need, and what's his flaw and sort of conflict?
His, of course, is to make a sale. Above all else, it's to make a sale. His methodology, like great salesmen are great manipulators. And, his flaw would be his lack of ethics someplace along the way.
Okay, so how would that create conflict?
Okay, let's see, that creates conflict. It doesn't. I don't think, does it?
No, it does. I mean, I could riff on this really well with you right now and show you like how you could start to differentiate their voices and how it could lead to conflict, but I want you to get there.
Okay. So let's see. He wants to
go back to your salesman. He's unethical.
Correct.
So how does that lead to conflict?
Okay. Well, Billy could maybe catch him on that, or
and if Billy catches them, what happens?
Yeah, so, first fireworks. I mean, I don't appreciate you doing this. And then, of course,
stakes go up. The guy thought he had a sale.
Yeah.
He was getting close. He's unethical.
Right. Okay, I see, yeah.
Billy responds to that, right? Okay. Question 2, backstory characteristics, right?
Yeah.
Third dimension of the three-dimensional character. Dimension 1, wants. Dimension 2, needs and flaw. Dimension 3, backstory characteristics, right? Is the salesman as smart as Billy?
Is he as smart? No, he wouldn't be. He thinks himself as, he thinks.
Okay, so again, how do you differentiate their voices?
Yeah, okay. Well, how can I put it? So Billy's more articulate, maybe. Although I don't know, salesmen tend to be very smooth.
But if you're slick and not smart,
yeah, you play the easy. You play the simple game, or you play the obvious game.
And what happens if someone questions you?
You can get defensive.
Get defensive, or you don't have the answer. So here's Billy, who's actually a tech guy.
Right. Who's done his homework on these things. And
here's the salesman who, as you say, is slick, has a good patter, but is unethical and not as bright as Billy.
Right.
Right? So, I mean, this has literally happened to me where I've gone into a car showroom and because I'm smart and I'm ethical, and then the salesman will say something to me about the technology of the car, which is part of his patter, right? And then I'll say to him, oh, but I thought the V6 engine only came with the Touring package upgrade.
Right.
And then the salesman is on the spot, right? Conflict. And then the salesman's voice changes. Well, we were talking about the Touring package. No, we weren't. We're looking at the base model. I told you I wanted the base model. You're telling me the base model comes with a V6, right? You see what I'm saying? And then I even maybe know more about V6 engines than he does in the way that Billy would know more about autonomous driving cars than the salesman because he's into technology.
Yeah.
So that's how you start to differentiate their voices. You don't want every scene to have the cleverest dialogue.
Okay. Yeah.
You want every scene to have the dialogue that's appropriate to the characters and the scene.
Gotcha.
Right? So that's a big note for you, is to go back in, and right now you have like 5 characters. You've got Billy, his girlfriend, his workmate, Sora, and the car salesman. And then there are a couple of others too in terms of the action plot, but those are your main ones.
Right.
You really start to, do you do character backstories?
Right? I used to do them a lot, and man, everybody just so poo-pooed them, and so I probably backed off too much from them.
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't necessarily have to write a whole character journal or whatever, but you really need to know your character, those elements of the 3-dimensional character.
Yeah.
Before you write a scene.
Yeah, no, that's good.
And the next note, which flows from this note, is that the big question in any thriller is, why do we want to take this ride with the protagonist? And why do we care about him or her enough that we are going to be thrilled when they're in jeopardy? What's your favorite thriller?
Oh man, let's see.
Don't even pick your favorite. What's one you've seen recently or can talk about easily?
Well, what is it? Get Out.
Okay, so why do we care about Daniel? I can't pronounce his last name, but the lead character in Get Out.
Yeah, because obviously he's that's when the Afro-American kid, right, goes to the racist family. Is that, am I get the right one? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. I've got another one in the back of my mind. Yeah. Because he's a good guy. He's a minority. He doesn't wear it on his sleeve. He's expecting to be treated just with dignity and respect. The family gives him that on the surface, but underneath, obviously, they have devious plans because of their racial animosity, their whatever, their horror menace that motivates them, right? So we care for him because he's an innocent victim. He's a really good guy. He treats his girlfriend well and doesn't deserve it.
Yeah, and the balancing act always in these thrillers is, on one hand, you sort of have to have unless you're just writing a straight out action movie like Taken or John Wick, where there really is no character development. It's just sort of like, you kidnap Liam Neeson's daughter. Oh, he's a black ops killer. You've kidnapped the wrong guy's daughter. Now he's going to spend 3 acts getting her back and killing everybody. But in a movie like Get Out, you really do, and in your movie, you have to accomplish 2 things, right? You have to accomplish, why are we going to be thrilled and worried for this guy? And also, how is this guy going to grow and change over the course of this thriller to the extent that the ending is really satisfying, right? And in this case, I won't keep using the Socratic method and putting it back on you. To me, what Daniel has to realize is Daniel feels like he is completely safe. He really does. He's a millennial black guy who feels like he lives in a post-racial culture, and he's got this beautiful white girlfriend, and he does feel totally safe going, to this liberal country estate and meeting all these white people, right? And the way he has to grow and change is to recognize that there really is danger out there, and racism is still out there, and people do look at him differently, especially as this very dark-skinned, African-American dude. And if he is going, it literally becomes life or death stakes. If he is going to survive, he has to stop living in a bubble and take charge of the fact that people treat him differently because he's black.
Right.
And he does. He grows and changes over the course of the thriller, takes charge, gets his cop friend to come, kills people, and escapes. You know? So as a first act, my gut level reaction to where you are right now with Autonomous is, I hate Billy. I don't want to take a ride with this guy. He's self-involved. He's lying to his girlfriend. He's kind of a schmuck. You know, it's like, it's okay if he should have flaws and he needs to grow and change and he should be a complex character. I'm not saying just turn him into Tom Hanks, Mr. Nice Guy. You know what I mean? But like, why do I want to take this ride with this guy?
Right.
With Daniel Kaluuya, I think that's how you pronounce it. I want to take it because he is. I like his vulnerability. He's actually, you know, on the one hand, he loves his wealthy white girlfriend, and they live a very upper middle class, wealthy lifestyle, and he seems very comfortable in his skin and with her. But we like how vulnerable he is. He does kind of say to her, "Do your parents know I'm black?" You know. And then like, cause I'm a little nervous about meeting them. I'm like, he has a nice vulnerability that draws us in. You know, what draws us into Billy?
Okay.
Cause by the end of this act, you know, Sora's fucking with them. And we want to care enough to be worried about him and worried that he's going to get back in Sora and things are going to get worse.
Gotcha.
You know?
Yeah, that's a great note. Yeah.
So that's a big gut level reaction I had to it. And then even more important is Sora. Remember we were talking about how the only movies that are allowed to have better antagonists than protagonists are kind of action movies and thrillers? Well, Sora is your antagonist.
Sure.
So you have to develop her character and her relationship with Billy in the first act. Right now, what you've written is sort of, if she's an AI that's bordering on human, then all she is a sociopath. And sociopaths, to me, are a really cheap way out to write a villain. Because, you know, they're evil and they kill people. Okay, great. Who cares? But like, if Sora's not a sociopath and she's built a relationship with Billy, and then in a very human way turns on him, now you've got a story.
Where do you think that turn should take place? Is that the turning point of Act One, you think, or the midpoint?
I mean, yeah, you'd have to really wrestle with all those, you know, how quickly does it happen? Where is it the most effective? I don't have an answer for you yet, you know, but I think that it's probably the full turn is not the turning point of Act One, right? The hook is that Sora has a really truly human personality, which therefore means that she can feel things like jealousy or guilt or you know, pick any of the 7 deadly sins, lust, greed, you know, and so that's the hook. And I think you want to burn a slightly slower fuse so that Billy's building a relationship with her. And then the first act turn is that, that relationship is turning dangerous, right? Because you need to build toward her fully turning on them. Because quite honestly, given what you've already written in the first act, I'd never get back in that car again. You got to convince the audience that.
Well, no, they've been kidnapped by that for into that where you are, right?
Yeah,
it's already happened.
But I mean, then you got to be like, even though Locke is an amazing movie,
yeah,
it's really hard to sustain tension locked in a car for 90 minutes.
Right.
So and Locke did it brilliantly, but boy, I don't even know how, I don't know how they pulled that off. And you're sort of challenging yourself to do it again and now do it differently.
Yeah.
Yes, it's different because she's autonomous, but like in terms of the shooting dynamics for the director, you're kind of trapping yourself to be compared to Locke. So I would argue in Locke's case, the car is not a character. Locke is the character, and what's going on the phone is the plot. In your movie, Sora is a character, so why get yourself trapped in a car on page 30?
Well, I thought that was like the hook of it. That's my comp.
No, the hook.
Different way, yeah.
The hook is that Sora has emotions,
Yeah.
and is eventually going to become dangerous. But I think you could have much more fun with rising conflict along the way in terms of the audience guessing, like, is she dangerous? Isn't she dangerous? When is she going to become dangerous? How is she going to become dangerous? And remember, you can also cheat in the sense that Sora, let's just, again, just riffing on it, could kill his girlfriend, but he doesn't see it. So, now you truly have a thriller because the audience knows the car is dangerous, but your protagonist doesn't. In a thriller, the audience is ahead of the protagonist and worried for them.
So this sounds like Hal in 2001, right?
Which I just saw again in glorious 70 millimeter, and it works so well.
Right.
Yeah, you actually should watch 2001 again if you haven't seen it at all or in a while, and look at the psychology between those two astronauts and how brilliantly Kubrick plays that out and keeps the audience in suspense. And that's, it's the best plotted section of the whole movie. The movie is very impressionistic and a lot of people find it boring, but that section is incredibly tense.
I had Hal in mind. As a matter of fact, his girlfriend, I had her named Hallie, which was
yeah.
But I thought, way too obvious. People won't go with that.
So I think you should really think about differentiating the character voices and then building Sora's character and building her relationship with Billy and reworking the first act to do all of that, to draw the audience in, to want to be on this ride with him, and to wonder if he's getting himself in trouble.
Yeah. Okay. So.
And then I got to move on because we got to do Ben.
Yeah. No. Okay. Just one last question. If going your route, because I really love the compression of it being inside. I think that's the
If you want to challenge yourself to do that, I would never say don't.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to be really brilliant to keep that entertaining for another 90, well, at least 70 to 80 pages.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go that route. I think I've got it. I've got, like I said, a really rough draft. The second one, because if I went your route and I exteriorize it, then I could have them go on a road trip, and then this is where it all begins to happen on the road.
What I would argue, though, is if you're going to do that, don't do the car sales. Don't do any of that stuff. Don't waste real estate on all that setup. Get right into a dude who has an autonomous car and is building a relationship with her.
Right. You mean if I go the road trip route?
No, your route.
My route? Yeah.
If you don't, if he has no relationship with Sora and Sora's not a character, then you will not have a thriller that we care about.
No, I understand that. No, that I get. That's a really, really great point. I've got that. Which means where I have is probably halfway through the script, maybe where I end this page 20, 30, 32 there. I can massage that to get there.
Yeah. All right. Thanks,
yep.
Dan.
Thank you.
Yep. Hey, Ben, you still with us? Uh-oh. I hope we didn't lose Ben.
We don't see him. 1, 2, 3. Nope.
Ben, you there? Ben?
Yay! He's there. He's there.
There he is.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. I get up.
Yay, Ben. So what day is it in South Africa?
It's Sunday, I think.
Yeah. And what time?
It's about 1 in the morning now.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I thought I kept Martin up past his bedtime.
Yes.
You I really kept up past your bedtime.
Yes, it is.
So Ben, you give me a unique problem. I think your script's terrific. I mean, I don't know what draft this is for you and who you've worked on it with over time, or if you just have polished this up yourself, but I think it's in terrific shape. I think it flows beautifully. You've got a powerful protagonist. You've got big themes. Your sense of structure is terrific. It's complex. I did not know where it was going or what was going to happen. I mean, you know, I think you've got a really terrific script here. You know, again, the only complexity for me is that it is very much a South African script.
Yeah.
You know, you cannot cast any international actors in it because it would feel, I mean, unless there are a few of the African British or African American, and by that I mean truly, you know, African immigrant kind of African American actors who've become stars who might then want to play Simon or Matthias, you know, that may be a way that you could find some financing for this. But other than that, to me, this is such a South African story and so specific. And I've been told by dialect coaches also that it's the hardest accent to get right. Yeah, you Brits, Martin, you're easy supposedly for dialect coaches.
Yeah, what? Chim chimney, chim chimney, chim.
Yeah,
chim.
exactly. I spoke to the clock at the Derby, but you guys have a really strange accent, and it's very difficult to fake. You know, as a matter of fact, nobody liked Leo in Blood Diamonds because his accent was terrible. So I mean, you know, Ben, I would love to mentor you, but like other than giving you some typos that I found. I think the only way I could really mentor you is to sort of say, can I be helpful in navigating like how you find financing for this movie or a director for this movie, or like how do you put this movie together in South Africa, you know? Which I know nothing about.
That is the best and worst news I've ever.
You froze again, I'm afraid.
Heard changing it.
Ben, you know what? Now that I have your face in mind, try turning the visual off and just using the audio because you're breaking up a lot.
Okay, I've turned visual off as well. Signal's very bad at the moment.
Yeah, but your voice is coming through much clearer now.
Okay, cool. So should I be thinking about changing the story so that I can get international talent interested in it? Or you think if I fiddle with it that way, I'm going to mess it up?
I think that ship has sailed. I think the era of plugging a white international star into a film that's about people of color backfires as opposed to works for you. I mean, unless it were a true story like the Clint Eastwood movie about the soccer team or something like that, where the white character is absolutely based in reality, and that's the only way to write it. otherwise, I mean, I know that in Hollywood right now, and I imagine it feels the same way in the South African film market. You know, people take offense at these sort of white savior movies where you have, you know, people of color who have their own agency and have their own stories, but the only way that you can make it dramatic and save them is to have the white person come in and do it for them. You know, it's just,
Yeah.
I think it's offensive. And I think that, you know, that's just my personal taste, but I think that also is very much the feeling in the film communities, you know, both American and global. So, and I think you have kind of naturally found in your protagonist, you know, such a strong character want and need and you know, a very strong kind of flaw in her wanting to be a good mother and a good person and do it the right way, you know, until she learns that she can't trust anybody but herself and has to take the charge of the whole situation. And you pull it off in a way that's believable, which is really difficult to do when you're talking about a woman who works as a domestic and, you know, and wasn't in the army and, you know, isn't a former police officer or a former athlete or, you know, anything that gives her that sort of movie backstory as to why she can rise to the occasion. You know, she rises to the occasion because she's a mother who's lost her child. And God damn it, she'll kill to get him back. And I found it very believable.
So Peter, if I can ask, I mean, you the man with the experience, you're an exec.
Yes.
Is this something I could pitch? How do I get this made? You know, in South Africa, our budgets are very, very limited.
Yes.
We struggle in that way. We get government financing. You know, we try and raise ourselves, but I would love to get overseas finance into this film so that we can do it properly. I've specifically wrote it.
I guess I would have a series of questions that would be based on if I had a script like this as an American producer, there would be a series of questions that I would ask, you know, that I would try to do with the writer. So first of all, are there literary agents in South Africa that specifically deal with South African screenwriters? You know, whether, and I don't even know like which of your major cities, whether it's Joburg or Cape Town or Durban or would be sort of the film capital, but are in any of those cities, are there people who are actually literary agents?
No, we do not. It's a foreign concept to South Africa. We do not have agents. Nobody reps us. We work for ourselves.
That makes things hard. Do you have friends who are writers and who have representation maybe in England?
Guys, I was just going to, because I was thinking of, you know, Tandy Newton. She's, her background, she's like half Zimbabwe, her background's like Zimbabwean or something.
Well, yeah, I would think
actually do have yeah.
I mean, I would think that if there really is no agent community in South Africa, then my guess would be that a lot of the South African talent would then have British representatives.
Definitely, there's much more connection between the UK and South Africa. I'd recommend going that route. You know, definitely.
And it's always better if you have a name you can drop or an actual introduction, which is why I asked if you have any friends who are actors or writers or directors or producers who would have those connections to the British agent community.
I actually do. I have a friend that used to work for the James Bond company and is quite well connected in British film circles. So you're saying that is the way to go, through him?
Absolutely. What you would want to do, if he's an active member of the British film community, he will know people at the big and small British agencies, and he should query his friends and say, I am friends with an extremely talented South African writer who has written a beautiful script, that has a crime thriller element. I think it would make a terrific local production in South Africa. I really would appreciate you reading it, and he would reach out to the lit agents that he knows in London. I know that if I got a query like that from any producer type person that I've been in business with, and they put it that way with that kind of level of enthusiasm or passion, I would read it right away. I never read it right away anymore because my stack's so high, but you know what I mean? I would read it,
Sure.
So I think, I really feel like the only other thing I wanted to ask you though is you make a mention and then you drop it of that the fact that the World Cup matches, and I don't think you meant this just in terms of when it was actually in South Africa in I think you say 2010, but just like in general, are connected to sex slavery?
Yes.
Is this based on research that you did?
Yes. I actually worked during the 2010 World Cup, going around to communities and educating them about human trafficking. And what we found out was through our research, human trafficking syndicates come into countries on the backs of these huge sporting events because they know that the police and everything are overtaxed with all the dignitaries and that kind of thing, and it just makes things so much easier. So that's how the story actually started.
Now, do you have any articles or white papers that back that up?
Yes, we do have research.
Okay, so that should be part of your package when you submit this to agents.
Okay.
And you should put on the front page, is any of this based actually specifically on a real case? Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
My niece was taken from a school.
Oh my God. Okay. So on the front page, it may already be there, but I never look at front pages. You want to have based on a true story.
Okay.
These kind of dramas are very difficult to get made in general. It does make it easier if they are based on a true story, because then the distributor and the publicity machinery can get articles in the news section and in the other sections about the true story and about the sex slave trade and about all of that element. And they don't, and that way it increases the ability to publicize dramas, which are often very difficult to get anything but like a review in the entertainment section. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So you would want to put together a package where you get the best possible article, were there articles about the true story of your niece?
Yeah, there were.
Okay. So you'd probably want to have an article about that true story about a girl who was snatched from her. And by the way, I'm sorry to be callous. I mean, is she okay? Was she found?
No. She was found. She's safe.
Okay, thank you, and thank God. Sometimes this movie business is so weird because you just start treating everything like a story, and you forget the human elements. So I didn't want to just skip over that.
No, that's cool. No, I get it.
But I think you want to have an article about the true story of your niece. The fact that it's your niece, I mean, it all adds up to a very, very powerful story. Now, another question. What is your background? Do you want to direct? Do you work in film? Have you gone to film school?
I work full-time as a writer at the moment. I write for South African television. I've written on a number of the dramas, soap operas, and things like that.
Okay. I felt there was a level of professionalism to the script that would have suggested that, so I'm not at all surprised.
Yeah, so I do I do work in the industry. I've done I've written a number of features and shorts as well. I've done some work for Nigeria, some work for Thailand as well.
Nigeria, the third largest film industry in the world.
Yes.
and one where I've never made it all the way through a movie, but there you go. They are kind of fun, though, in their craziness.
Yeah, very different.
Very different storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I asked the directing question is that given that it is a personal story,
yeah,
you really could lay claim to also wanting to direct this. And then as a writer, in some ways, a dark, difficult drama like this is actually easier to get made as a writer-director movie than trying to find the right director
sure,
to come in and direct it.
Yeah.
You know?
I hear you.
So in a way, if you would enjoy directing and feel like you would be up to the challenge, I think that would be part of your, and you know, I've directed 3 movies with first-time directors, all of whom, produced 3 movies with first-time directors, you know, all of whom I sold on the premise that they wrote a great script, they visualized it, you know, this is their world, their story, they should realize it on screen. And in, you know, one of those cases, the person did have some background as a director in terms of music videos and PSAs, and in another case, it was someone who was a successful producer. But like, you have that credibility as a working and successful TV and screenwriter, you know what I mean? So it's like, in a way, I think that strengthens your ability to get it made. And it probably would also strengthen your ability to get any kind of funding from either the national or provincial film funds, which I imagine your country has, which our country, of course, does not.
Yeah, we do.
So I think that, you know, if you haven't already, you should be looking at their websites for what kind of funding opportunities they have to fund local production. And then again, separately, if it's anything like the United States, if they have separate categories for diversity and for
sure,
you know, stories that specifically deal with people of color, and often there's a whole separate pot of money, you know, for those opportunities.
Sure.
And you'd want to be applying to all of those, you know, because that's really probably how you get a movie like this off the ground. You get a piece of financing out of the federal or provincial government, and then you take that piece of financing, you know, to a local film studio or producer, and you cobble together the rest of the financing. And you could maybe get some Commonwealth financing even without any of participation from a Brit or a Canadian or Australian. But I think those Commonwealth financing deals still exist.
Yeah, I'm gonna pipe in and say that for Canada at least they do.
See, yeah. Oh, thank you, Ari.
Yeah. So I mean, you can actually get you can either get like straight up financing and or like tax credits depending on like talent and post production. In your case, probably.
Cool.
I was going to say, you know, it sounds like very much like a Channel 4 sort of project in the UK as well. So that they might be worth checking out, Ben.
Okay, thank you. I will do that.
Ben, would you send me the articles? Can you scan and send those to me? I will think about anybody I know stateside who has South African connections or even British connections that maybe could be helpful to you. years ago, I did try to put together a South African movie, and did not have success with it. It was, it was very difficult to cobble together the financing. And I had Liev Schreiber attached to star in it, and I mean, I don't mean to be negative. I'm just saying it takes a certain level of expertise to put together these foreign co-productions, especially when you're not on the ground in the country of origin. And so I was trying to put this together from LA with an American writer-director of South African origin, and we did legitimately have a white lead role, even though it involved the apartheid era and all sorts of interesting subject matter. And Liev Schreiber was not the star he is today when we had him. He hadn't done Ray Donovan, and he hadn't done some of his bigger movies. He was more of sort of a New York indie actor. So he didn't really help with the financing in the way that we hoped he would. But we were really having trouble finding the kind of sources of South African financing, and we couldn't apply for the federal or state money because the writer-director, even though he was of South African origin, was American. So it was complicated. But I think that on the ground, I mean, I guess the other thing I would argue is, have you researched sort of, and I don't, keep up with South African cinema the way I should or could, but are there sort of established producers who who make quality films, who make independent films, who make films that they want to get on the international film festival circuit? I really see that's how this film would break out, who you could get the script to. Are you with us, Ben?
Yeah, I'm here. Peter, the problem in South Africa is our directors don't know how to direct action at all. It just comes off looking really bad. One of the ideas that I had that I just want to throw in to the ring while we're chatting about it, I did a trip to Thailand in February because I wrote a script, a co-production between South Africa and Thailand on rhino poaching. And while I was over there, somebody had a look at the treatment and synopsis for this film, and they loved it. And they pitched the idea to me of possibly a Thai-South African co-production because human trafficking is also quite a huge topic in Thailand.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea would be that the protagonist would start her journey here, but have to go to Thailand, to get the kid back. What are your thoughts on that?
Very mixed. If you've been listening in on all the conversations we've had, I'm such a big believer in the integrity of where a story comes from. And although I think you probably could write a really good version of that, it becomes a very different kind of film, and it starts to feel a little fakey to me. Like, you'd have to really bend over backwards to figure out how this very poor woman, from one of the townships is suddenly getting a plane ticket to Thailand, and then how the hell she would have any agency in Thailand to free her kid from sex slavery. Like, everything you've created in South Africa feels very believable to me, which is what's so powerful about it, right? Because, Simon used to be on the streets and now he's a cop and he's her former lover, and nothing that they do requires a great deal of money or a great deal, a huge leap of faith, and, turning it around and kidnapping his kids is a very believable way of getting someone who seems unbeatable like Matthias, beatable, so like, but now you turn it around to Thailand when now suddenly the kid's in some kind of bordello and protected by the Thai mafia, and it's like, oh my God, it's just going to become fake,
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it if the financing exists and someone will pay you to rewrite the script. You know what I mean? I would certainly never keep it from a payday.
Yeah,
But
transplantable story though, so you could tell the story. I mean, I know you, Ben, you're South African, but you could maybe transplant it to like the UK, or I mean, it sounds like the second series of The Wire, same kind of themes. But I mean, I haven't read it yet. I'm going to read it. Just haven't had time to read it. But is it transplantable? Or is it very South African story? That's what it's got to be.
It's hard to say because so much of what makes a screenplay sing, and this is like what, you know, what I was talking about with Ned, it is the level of specificity in the character voices and the character details and the geography. And, you know, there's so much that Ben has built into this about the sugarcane fields and how those relate to the townships and how those relate to, you know, the wild boars that exist in the sugarcane fields and her backside. Like, I'm sure you could make all of that up for a Thai setting or for a British setting, but it would just be a hugely different research project. You know, it's like, isn't that right, Ben?
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Look, the idea behind the story was to make the themes universal and relatable.
Which they are.
It's a simple story about a mom. Yeah, it's just about a mother who wants her child back, and she'll do whatever she has to get him back.
Correct.
That's all the story is about. But I agree with you about the world. Yeah, to try and.
I mean,
yeah, to try and transfer.
For any of those,
sorry, carry on, Peter.
For any of those of you who are still on, who are more in the science fiction realm or the fantasy realm, world building exists in all scripts. You know, do read Ben's script. He's done a fantastic job of world building in this script. You read it and you know the rules of the township. You know the rules of the cane fields. These are not places I have ever been, and I don't know how they work. But I read the script and I can see them and I can understand it, and I can understand the taxi cab system and how that rules people's lives and the things that the mother has to go through just to talk to this kid. You know, the level of specificity creates, just like in science fiction, obstacles and opportunities for the protagonist that have to do with world building as much as they have to do with, as Ben said, the very universal nature of a mother saying, "You took my child, I will stop at nothing to get him back." That has nothing to do with South Africa. You know, that could be anywhere. But the world building that he does is very specific to a working lower middle class life in a township in South Africa. You know, and that's why it's so hard. It's like, yeah, you could do that in Thailand, or in Britain, you know, but you'd almost have to kind of go one for one. Okay, what replaces the cane fields, and what replaces the taxi cabs, and what replaces the domestic work and the rich woman, white woman's house, and what isolates this woman to such a degree, because she's very isolated. You know, how does a white woman in England or a Thai woman in Thailand get that isolated? Maybe they can, maybe they can't. But because she's unmarried, because she doesn't have the sort of honor of being a married woman, you know, people treat her in a certain way. It's just all very specific. Right, Ben? I mean, I think that's a big part of what you're after.
No, you've hit the nail on the head. Because I also wanted to transport a little bit of South African culture and what it's like here through the movie without making it so culturally specific nobody could relate to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we got to wrap up. Everybody's been on for a long time, but everybody has their various assignments for next week. You're all terrific. It's been a pleasure working with all of you.
Fantastic too. Thank you so much.
Ben, I will send you some typos that I found. Actually, towards the end, you must have gotten tired, and you have some pretty big big and confusing typos where you call like Simon Matthias or you call Matthias Simon, and then you change the son's name in one place to what probably was an old name you had for him. So I'll give you all those typos.
Cool. That's cool.
But I have one or two other very small notes. But other than that, I really, I feel like I'm not earning my money. Like you've got a pretty terrific script there. So I guess my homework really more is send me the articles and let me see about how I can be helpful to you in getting this thing produced.
Hey, just one thought on it. The World Cup angle is Peter said, is extremely interesting. Would it take too much to change your script to add an Interpol agent that comes in from Europe? Then you can get your White Star. But the twist is, of course, he doesn't get the South African culture, and your female protagonist still does what she does to win the day at the end. But you get the cachet of bringing in an international star to help find financing. Is that what do you think, Peter and Ben? Is that a way to go on something like this?
Well, I think that goes to the conversation that we had earlier, which is about integrity. I feel like, again, if that's the only way to get the script financed, and Ben wanted to do a rewrite like that, it might be worth doing. But he's got such a good script right now.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
That I think to unravel it, to build that White Star in before we've even given a chance to this good script to get made with this all African cast, I feel like that should be a last ditch effort as opposed to something that you just sort of go to,
Gotcha.
Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think I've learned quite a valuable lesson with the word you used tonight, which is integrity. I think I should try the route, like you said, of getting provincial financing, local financing, see who I can contact in England. If it works out that way, I'd be very happy because I think it works holistically. And I think the audience is clever enough to also sense when you've kind of just inserted something for the sake of it at the last moment. So if I can possibly not do that, if I have to, I will. But if I don't have to, I try not to.
Ben, why don't you? I'm spitballing, but I'm just thinking, why don't you send the script to Tandy Newton's agent, for example?
Unfortunately, without an offer and with her success on Westworld,
don't go there.
The agent won't even give it to her. She will never read it. I mean, she might actually read a script like this and love it, but in my experience as a producer, agents exist to protect their clients from good material like this. They just want to get offers, so Ben would have to be in a position where if he did have some provincial financing or he had a company in South Africa that could make an offer, then the agent gets interested. And then the agent has a fiduciary responsibility to the client to take that offer, to her. Tandy also is look, we all should be so lucky to have Tandy Newton in the movie, and Ben, it would be great if you had her in this movie. But she ain't central casting for Ben's lead lady. She's so beautiful and so glamorous. When you read the script, you'll see his character is very much a real woman and a country woman. And I mean, you could dress Tandy down, but you're never going to hide how gorgeous she is.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Yeah,
appreciate the time.
Thank all of you, and I'll see you all in a week. And Ben, is there something else you want to work on that maybe is earlier in the process that you could send me?
I'll find something and I'll send something out.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'll send you another. Yeah, cool. Okay. Thanks, Peter.
All right. Thanks very much, everybody.
Have a good week.
Good night, you all.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Ciao.
Yeah, good night.